It had very little fire damage.
It had only a couple tiny little fires. And people have to picture this in Santa Barbara, a 47-story building. Picture this in Santa Barbara, 47 stories, practically 600 feet.
Right.
Imagine this thing, got a couple tiny little fires in the lower floors, and then you're watching it, and 10 seconds, poof, it's down, and it's nothing but pulverized pieces of steel and dust.
And dust.
And then imagine KEYT and news press. All they have is one little blurb. Oh, the tallest building anywhere in the area just fell down. And on to the weather now.
Yeah, why was it that the media showed us buildings, the North and South Tower, but didn't show us Building 7 falling down all the time? They showed us constantly North and South Tower falling.
Well, they mostly showed the tower being hit. They didn't even show a lot of the tower falling, but they show mostly the tower being hit, which shocks everybody. They won't even talk much about Building 7. And then the government's the same way. So the government said after these buildings fell down, they said, well, we'll investigate. Mm-hmm. Okay? After 7 months of investigating, FEMA, in their report, says, well, we don't know what happened to Building 7.
We don't know what happened to Building 7.
And then the next report...
That's what FEMA said.
Their commission report didn't even mention Building 7. So we've got a building, 47 stories, it just pulverizes itself. The government's, I don't see anything.
Right.
And the news people... What is wrong with these people?
Again, I'd like to read a little bit of what the physics professor from Brigham Young says. He says, previous investigations, including those of FEMA, since you brought up FEMA, and their investigation, and the 911 Commission, and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, he says they all ignore the physics and chemistry of what happened on September 11th to the Twin Towers in the 47-story building known as number 7. He says the official explanation that fires cause structural damage that caused the buildings to collapse cannot be backed up by either testing or history. So hopefully we'll get some more experts coming out here shortly that are willing to put their names out there and not be afraid to buck the resistance to this.
Yeah, because because like I said, as people look into it, they become on our side.
Right. And
so it's growing, and the government can't stop it. And, KEYT can hide all they want, but this is coming out eventually. And eventually people are going to start asking, why are they covering this up? This is a major crime. And then it gets worse, because when you realize when these towers came down, those clouds of dust, remember those things?
Right.
A lot of people say, well, they were dust. They weren't dust, like the stuff that falls on your kitchen table. It was pulverized buildings, pulverized windows, pulverized computers, pulverized fluorescent light bulbs. There are right now still tremendous health problems from breathing it, getting it in your eyes, your skin. There are skin rashes. Mm-hmm. There are people with lung problems now, right. Kidney problems, liver problems. That was demolition debris. It was not dust. And they are suffering over there from it.
Now, one last thing before we move to the Pentagon, and that is back to Silverstein's comments. When I heard those, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I think out of all the evidence that we have for most folks who are coming to grips with this, that's one of the biggest things when they hear Silverstein admitting to pulling the building. That indicates that they would have to have pre-planted demolition explosives. They could, in other words, what I'm saying, you can take it from here, but they can't do it that fast. They can't.
Right. His statement, you cannot take his statement literally because it doesn't make sense. He's trying to imply, no matter how you interpret his statement, it means nothing.
Well, at least it means that if they did a demolition, it had to already be set up for that.
Yeah, that's the only way you can interpret it. But you see, he's trying to make this sound like the fire department made the decision that day.
That doesn't make sense.
See, that's what I mean. His statement, by the way it reads, you cannot interpret it to make sense. What should have happened is the government should have said, bring these people in so we can talk to them. What is going on with Silverstein in the fire department? Nobody asked them anything.
They didn't do that in the commission?
Nobody asked them anything. And where are these investigative
reporters? They didn't bring him in and say, what are you talking about on PBS?
Right.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
They ignore it. They ignored it. Plus, then he says to the insurance company, I want $800 million for Building 7 falling down. They've already. I know they gave him about half that.
Those
400
buildings were owned by us, the taxpayers.
Well, the 2 towers.
The 2 towers were owned by the taxpayers.
He already had Building 7.
And he had a lease for the 2 towers.
Yes, and he had an insurance policy, so he gets about $4 billion.
But why does he get the payoff from the insurance company because he has a lease when they're built and owned by the taxpayer?
But see, no one asks these questions except us. The government doesn't ask what's going on. The investigative reporters don't ask. There are so many weird things about this.
Right.
This is what I think scares people. When you look at this, you look at the murders that went on, the people that are in New York right now suffering. Some firemen just recently died from breathing that dust. It took this long.
And you talk about in your book about the fact that there was a desire amongst New York officials and New York citizens. I don't want to say this wrong. There was an animosity toward the buildings.
A lot of people didn't like them. The way they look, and they weren't very profitable. So a lot of people wanted just to get rid of them.
Wanted to get rid of
them. And the government actually looked into, well, how much would it cost to demolish those buildings? And they discovered it would cost a lot because they first had to pull out the asbestos.
So there were actually efforts looking into
how to demolish it. Right. This is the other funny thing. They looked into it. They looked at the cost of demolishing it. It was just not that long before these towers fell down. And so here we got the government trying to get rid of them. People want to get rid of them. Well,
I think people are about ready to freak out in our viewership. So we better move to another topic because this is so much to grasp about all this. And I think we did pretty good to get that much out there so quickly in our time slots, so time allowed. So let's move to the Pentagon. Was there wreckage of the 757 found?
Yeah, now this is another one. The Pentagon was supposed to be hit by a large commercial airplane, Flight 77. Now the problem with this is you've got this airplane. It was flying all the way over by Ohio when it finally disappeared. Indianapolis, the air controllers at Indianapolis had the last communication with it.
By Ohio.
But it was by the Ohio area when suddenly the Indianapolis air controller tries to contact it and it doesn't respond. And they put out this signal, help, this plane's gone. All of a sudden the plane's missing.
Right. And now so this was after they already knew about the other hijacked planes.
Well, from the controller's point of view, they didn't know about it yet. You know, it's
interesting.
Well, it's because, you know, it takes time for things to get around. But see, this plane had just disappeared. So they sent out a call for help. So where's this plane?
Right.
And then about a half an hour to 45 minutes later.
They can't find it until it shows up all...
Yeah, all of a sudden, about a half an hour later, the radar operators at the Washington, D.C. area see this plane spiraling down.
Spiraling down from a higher altitude.
Yeah, from a high altitude. It's spiraling down, and the guy's saying, wow, it's so smooth.
Well, a 757 can't do that.
That's what they're looking. They're like, wow, this is so smooth. They got quotes. It's so smooth. What a pilot. And then it comes down to treetop level. It's knocking down light poles.
That's
and
impossible.
Then it crosses over the highway, drops down to grass level, and hits.
You can't take a 757 on a grass level, as you talk about in your book. This is
what pilots will say. They look at this and they think, this is impossible. A Boeing 757 is equivalent to a bus with wings. It's meant to transport people. It's extremely unmaneuverable.
Right.
It's not one of those trick biplanes that you can go circles and flips.
So it supposedly hits the Pentagon. The military's own account is it hits the Pentagon on the first floor, the ground floor.
It hits the first floor. The problem is the plane, the size of the plane, it's bigger than the first floor.
And we'll put up on screen the damage to the Pentagon, and you go into this a lot in your book about how the damage is insignificant compared to what should have been the case with a plane like this.
Yes, when the planes hit the South Tower and the North Tower, you can see, like the North Tower, you can just see this plane-shaped hole.
But this wasn't even a steel building. This was concrete.
Yeah, it hits the building, you can't find a hole.
Plus the roof is still standing.
Right. People don't know this. See, here's another thing most people don't know. They've seen pictures of that broken part of the building. That's not what happened. When this plane first crossed over that highway and then crashed, people on the highway stopped. Some of them had cameras, and they're taking pictures.
And it shows the roof of the Pentagon still intact.
The Pentagon was completely intact. There's nothing on the grass. There's nothing. There's no firemen yet.
To even show the jet coming in at grass level. There's no damage on the grass.
Yeah. There's no damage anywhere. There's just this little fire.
Right.
There's a couple broken windows. And then, about 20 minutes later, this portion of the Pentagon tips.
Okay. Now, a lot of folks should be thinking, if they're really on top of this, well, if a jet's coming in, a big, huge airliner like that, well, the Pentagon certainly has air defense. Why couldn't they have taken out this jet? So
well, that's where that's what it looks like it did happen.